Studio in the great state of New Hampshire. Welcome to the Sounds Like a Search and Rescue podcast, where we discuss all things related to hiking and search and rescue in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Here are your hosts, Mike and Stump.
Okay, I'm recording. We are live now.
All right. The flesh.
Episode 80. So good to see you, Stomp.
Yeah, good to see you too. You survived your crazy weekend, I guess.
I was in Vegas.
Yeah, no kidding. I was getting nervous. I hadn't heard from you because I originally thought you were gone for like 2 days. So when it was Monday night or whenever I reached out to you, or Tuesday even, like, I hope he's okay.
Yeah, no, I was fine. We were, we left Saturday and then, Monday, Tuesday. Sunday, Monday we were there, and then Tuesday was an all-day kind of flying back deal.
That's great.
Have you been to Vegas?
I've driven through, and I've seen the surrounding sites, but that's about it.
Such a weird town.
Strip. Yeah, well, I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, I did. There was a concert out there, so it was a very weird mix of... There was a concert called When We Were Young. It was like Blink 182 and My Chemical Romance and a bunch of these, like, I don't know, 2000s like emo type bands, I guess, because there was a lot of blue-haired people with like septum piercings walking around, because the concert got canceled. So it was like there was a windstorm there, so the concert got canceled. So all of the blue-haired people were like wandering around the casinos with nothing to do, and they were mixed in with there was like another set of people that were all wearing like matching like gym suits or track suits. They were wearing like matching track suits with like gold chains, and like it was almost like the breakdancers and the emo people like met. And I don't understand. Like the tracksuit guys were like from some other country.
Okay.
In Eastern Europe. I don't know what was going on, but it was very weird.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I mean, well, it's a melting pot there for sure.
Oh yeah.
You get visitors from all over the world.
Yeah, it was fun, but a little gambling, a little football, a little golfing. We went golfing on Monday, and the golf course was beautiful. But then we got out to like the 8th hole, and there's like homeless people just sleeping out by the tee.
Oh, geez, really?
Yeah, it was like very weird. Like the really nice golf course, but then homeless people.
Is it becoming a problem there, from what you could see?
I haven't been there. I went 10 years ago, I'd say.
Okay.
And there was definitely more kind of homeless people out sleeping they have these walkways that connect the casinos, because you don't want to cross the street out there because the roads are like 6 lanes wide.
Yeah.
So they have these walkways, and what I noticed is before it was very much like there wasn't much nonsense going on in the walkways, but when you take these walkways now, there was a lot of like... It was some homeless people sleeping, but there was a lot of like people dressed up like Captain America and Elmo, and girls in skimpy outfits trying to like get you to take pictures with them. And then I think what they do is they'll charge you, or you have to pay tips to them for pictures, but they're very aggressive. And it was, I got that move. I've worked in the city for years, so I know the move. Like, you don't make eye contact. You sort of like... use somebody else to buffer so that they don't, you never want to draw attention to yourself. So I was fine, but then I noticed that like if anybody like showed any weakness, they would jump right on them.
Isn't that funny? Huh?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. That's always tricky. I mean, there's that school of thought where if you give them money or whatever, then you're just enabling their situation or perhaps their hidden drug addiction or whatever they're suffering from. And then there's the other school of thought that, just you got to help your neighbor in need. But anyway, back to the homelessness, though. I mean, it seems to be a growing problem, like nationwide. The economy certainly doesn't help, but...
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot to go by as far as Vegas, but I just did seem like it was a little bit more of a presence this time around than it was 10 years ago. But overall, it's nice. Yeah. I didn't get to do much pool time because it was pretty cold out there. It was like mid-60s, so that's the one thing I missed. But I'm probably planning on going back soon. So highly recommend it. Mountains out there are beautiful. I didn't get a chance to do much hiking or exploring, but I could see them in the distance. They look nice.
Yeah. Hangover Part 4. You survived.
Yeah.
Come
There was
back
only
with
3 of us.
tattoos on your face.
No tattoos. There was only 3 of us, but I was going to take one of the homeless guys and have him be part of our wolf pack, and then send him up on the roof. So. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
All right. So enough of my Vegas trips. I'm back to normal now. I'm hopefully going hiking this weekend. But you want to announce, Stomp, I see in our script here, I don't know anything about this. You want to announce our first listener spotlight.
Yeah. We're trying to broaden out it a little bit for our topics. And, there have been several requests by listeners saying, hey, I think we have a really neat story to tell. Would you guys consider having us on? So next week, we're going to give it a shot, and we are going to have a couple that I actually met. I think, Mike, you might have met them at the 100K, but they approached me earlier in the evening and actually helped me lug my gear in and stuff like that. So Jake and Julie are going to jump on next week, and we're going to hear their story. And, from the script that they sent over and topic ideas, I think it's going to be a really nice conversation. So keep a lookout for that.
Yes, very excited. Always fun to meet new people. And I think I did meet them briefly, but I'm sure they're going to have some cool stories. I'm always happy to geek out about hiking.
Oh, no question about it. And let's see here. Oh, did you hear about Zeb's? They're cutting back their hours because of staffing issues. This
is an outrage. Where am I going to get my my candy and my salsa?
Soda pop. Yeah. Well, apparently it's staffing issues. I'm just shocked. I just have questions about this. Like, why are there staffing issues? Where are these people? Like, what's going on? There's no more government incentive, right? Are they on unemployment? What's happening here? I don't know,
but I feel like if I was like a retired person that was living up in like the North Conway area, like picking up a few hours at Zeb's would be like the coolest thing ever. I'll make some soap. Yeah. I'll stock the shelves with salsa. I'll go up and like do that, the stuffed animal mousses. I do whatever I could to keep the store running. That place is great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are plenty of kids around. That seems like a job for an adolescent. Where are they?
You could get young kids, or you could get retirees, or whatever. But
I don't know. I don't get it.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, I do not get it. I'm not sure what the hell's going on, but it's impacting everything. I'm even seeing it a little bit in some of these nursing homes. Like I'm doing the virtual PT, and they're actually cutting back, and it's impacting my virtual PT. I'm like, what is going on? Anyhow, personal frustration.
Interesting. I'm just looking at the Zeb's website here, and the one thing I am noticing, which is kind of interesting, is like it doesn't look like there's any way for you to apply for a job on the website.
Just like an old school website.
Yeah, well, it doesn't look horrible. You can buy a gift certificate on here. You should be able to apply for a job, but
interesting.
Yeah, I wonder how many people have to work at Zeb's at one time. I mean, that place gets crazy sometimes. Like, I've been in there where you can't even move.
Yeah, I would imagine at least probably a dozen people.
Yeah, I would think so too. So, well, that's too bad. So if you're up in North Conway and you're looking for some extra hours, definitely knock on Zeb's door and see if you can get a job there.
Yeah. Otherwise, don't give them any business because they don't have the people to handle your business. That's the catch-22. It's like brutal.
Yeah, it's interesting. Man. I mean, I'm a recruiter by trade, so I could certainly help them with a strategy on hiring if they want to reach out to me. But overall, I mean, I think my guess would be that it's probably going to always be sort of difficult up in those areas because it's such a retail and services heavy economy that, those jobs by nature tend to be more of turnover. And, if you get a good person that's willing to stay long term, then, it's like gold, but it's more common to have people sort of be transient in their lives and pick up some hours for 6 months or a year and then move on to, something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe they will reach out.
Yes. And then speaking of stretching thin here, Stomp, you had sent over a video about how search and rescue teams are getting stretched thin on staffing as well.
Yeah, I saw this randomly. It's a PBS NewsHour video, and it starts off over on the western side of the country in Colorado, I believe, if I remember correctly. But basically, Colorado is experiencing record numbers of rescues. I mean, literally like thousands of rescues throughout the state and the region. And I was watching the video, and halfway through, they put in Jim Nealand, actually, from Fish and Game here in New Hampshire, just for a brief little snippet. And he was it seemed to me like he was put in there as a counterpoint, because what the gist of this video is how do you manage this? The search and rescue teams are spread so thin. And then it went into this billing topic. Do you bill people? Do you not bill people? So it's a very interesting watch. I'm not going to make any judgment on it. It did look, though, to me as though they put New Hampshire in there as sort of like, I don't know. It just came across to me as like, oh, New Hampshire's the bad guy for billing people, that type of vibe. You know what I mean? So check it out and see what you think, and let us know. Have you seen it, Mike?
I did watch it. Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and I did sort of think a little bit about from a staffing perspective.
Sure.
Like, it seems like the volunteer organizations in New Hampshire don't tend to have that issue. Maybe it's because the volume of rescues isn't as high as a place like Colorado, but it seems to me like you would want to make sure that you have a really good sort of recruiting strategy. And my first guess is probably, I wonder whether some of these search and rescue teams that are struggling for staffing, whether or not the point of entry is too intimidating or perceived to be so intimidating that they don't get people that otherwise would join. Because I feel like in New Hampshire, it's sort of very open, like, let's see how everyone can participate. Obviously, you don't want anyone that's physically incapable of doing the job because they put everyone at risk, but the barrier to entry for search and rescue teams should not be so high that people are afraid to explore it.
Yeah. I wonder what their for lack of a better word, burnout rate is, or burnout phenomena is, because if you're dealing with that many, I say I'm really ignorant about how the Western teams are organized, but if you're dealing with that many rescues, holy moly, you better have some robust membership.
Yeah, and I also wonder, like, is it such crazy terrain out there? Are so many of these rescues requiring like ropes and true mountaineering experience? Like, if every rescue in New Hampshire required like mountain rescue service, then it would be a different situation. Like, but most of the search and rescues here in New Hampshire are just carryouts.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. But check out the video. It's just an interesting. I just want to get your take on how they placed New Hampshire in the story, because it's sort of interesting.
Yeah, and I do think that like New Hampshire should be pretty proud of themselves as far as like how they've got their infrastructure set up and how capable the search and rescue teams are of responding and supporting. Because it doesn't sound like that's the case in a lot of other places.
Oh yeah, well, except for the fact that some of the other states are implementing the variations on the hike safe card, it would seem. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. So other states are following suit. And that's been a massive success here in New Hampshire.
Yeah. Well, I think that they should expand the hike safe card, Stomp, and add a approach animals safely card as well.
Yes, that would be good too. Super important. And why do you say that?
Well, because you put in another article here about a hiker who claims she was charged and gored by a bison. So,
Yeah.
and you can see the video on here, and you can see that, you know, the person was just a little too close to the bison here. So
Yeah.
she's just kind of talking to them, and like, I think when you're within reach of getting gored, then it's kind of on you.
But dude, it got 2 million views. Like, it was totally worth it.
Yeah, exactly. I love the reaction when she when the bison just turns around and just is like, "Get out of my world!" Like, she's just like, "Oh my god."
Yeah, it's insane. Oh my God. Hey, whatever. The dopamine's a strong habit.
Yeah, I mean, in her defense, I guess she's probably like 5 or 6 feet away, but that's still way too close.
Oh yeah, for sure. For a massive animal like that with a history of charging, hell no.
Well, we will put that up on the show notes. And then Stomp, I haven't got a chance to look at this. You said Jen Greasy sent us some info about bear encounters.
Yeah, well, it's sort of interesting. She sent it with a note saying this should give Mike some more information rather than just throwing food at them. And I thought that was sort of funny. But the article is interesting. It sort of encompasses everything that we've touched upon over several episodes by now, I would think, in terms of strategy. So I won't bore you guys to death with it, but it does go a little bit deeper than you and I may have touched upon with different strategies and circumstances and how to deal with situations. So we'll give you the link for that as well. It's very interesting.
Okay. So throwing my Snickers bar at the beer and running away isn't going to work.
Well, I think there's validity to that for sure. Yeah. I don't recall seeing that strategy in the article, unfortunately. Yeah. But of course, looking big and avoiding the cross intersection with cubs and things like that are all in there. But there are a couple others that are handy. And yeah, cool. Thanks, Jen.
All right. Well, sticking with the topic of animal encounters here. So this article has been going around. Like, I feel like this stuff always happens in like Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, or whatever. But there's an article going around. I can only assume this nice older lady, she's out sort of collecting food or doing what she's doing, walking around in the wilderness in Indonesia, and she went missing. So her name was Jarrah, and she's 54 years old. She was collecting rubber from a plantation in the Jambi province, and her husband was searching the area, and unfortunately, Stomp, it didn't end well.
What happened?
I mean, nightmare fuel. A 22-foot giant snake ate this poor woman.
Oh my God. Isn't that insane?
And they like every time so this same story kind of happens every couple of years, and it's always like the pictures are exactly the same. It's like the snake with a giant bulge in the middle of it, and apparently like then this probably isn't even like the snake eating a human. This is probably just like stock photo or something, but they cut it open and they found like all of her clothes and everything in there. So it's like pretty creepy.
That is unbelievable. So they found the woman in the snake?
Yes.
Wow. That is crazy. How does a python disable you? Does it like bite you, or?
I think they squeeze you to death.
But, well, I mean, slowly though. I would assume that she had time to sort of wrestle away. I just don't know how
I don't. I think I think a 54-year-old woman in Indonesia is probably not strong enough to fight off a 22-foot python once it starts squeezing. I mean, it's like a giant muscle. I don't even think you could fight it off.
Well, because I'm 53 in about a week.
Yeah, but you're like a bigger guy. But I don't even know if you would have the strength to like fight it off.
I'm gonna have to look up some videos on this. I guess I'll go to like LiveLeak or something and do some more investigating, because I'm fascinated by this. Like, how does a snake do that? So
I feel like the crocodile hunter, like he had some videos where like the snakes were wrapping around him and he was like getting his way out of it. So I think you have to like get to the end of it and like you can start pushing it a little bit. But you should find someone that has a giant snake and see if you can get out of it.
I think, well, let's try it. Yeah.
No, let you try it.
I can think of some YouTube channels that might be interested in that, but we'll see what happens.
That is true. So anyway, that's it. Stay away from beer. Stay away from bisons. Definitely stay away from pythons.
Yeah.
But that's all we have in animal news. In environmental news, Stomp, you've pulled an article here. I'm in the market for a new car at this point, and my wife is looking for a big gas guzzler. But electric vehicles are definitely of interest to me. But you pulled this article talking about how hilly and windy terrain will cut an electric vehicles battery time in half.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It comes out of Wyoming in particular, and it's just an individual's ordeal, traveling to different locations in the state. And there's a report. He wrote a book about the subject titled On the Trail, Electric Vehicle Advice and Anxiety. And on top of that, there's additional information that was put out that essentially says that if you have an EV car, you have to factor in hilly terrain and winds, which you would assume would be the case in some place like New Hampshire or Wyoming. And according to this information, it's saying it can potentially cut your EV battery life by half. That's pretty amazing. I don't know. If that's the case, that would be a disaster for certain locations.
Yeah, I mean, I keep thinking about it because my wife's car is kind of, we've had it for like 9 years, so it is time for a new one. And we did do some shopping last week, and I think I got to do a little bit more this weekend, which hopefully isn't going to screw up my hiking. But just the idea of doing an electric car at this point would just be a non-starter for us, just because we're driving from Amesbury to Maine, and then we do a fair amount of good road trips. But I still don't necessarily think I would trust the electric vehicle to I would have to get like a charging thing up in Maine and then have a charging thing at home. And
the story talks about that, like you can't call AAA. What are they going to do? Charge on the road? No, they're going to drag you somewhere to charge. So, I mean, that's another. We talked about infrastructure a bit ago, but that's another trouble spot for a lot of this. But that leads into the next article. Apparently, some Finnish study came out and said that the battery turnover is somewhere around 10 years, and at that type of turnover rate, there isn't enough cobalt and lithium, but specifically cobalt at the moment, because they would have to dig for more to actually fulfill that turnover. So I think there's a lot of headwinds, heading into this EV idea. It's very interesting as it develops.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, hopefully in like 5 years, all this stuff will be pretty much sorted out, and the mileage ranges and all that stuff will be such that it's a non-issue. But we'll see. Yeah. I just don't have the stomach to drop like 60 or 70 grand on an electric vehicle at this point to sort of risk it with the new technology, given my situation.
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, it's outrageous. I mean, like what's the cheapest? Like 40 grand? Somewhere around there?
Yeah, I think so. But anyway, I think snowmobiling is the way to go anyway, Stomp. Forget these electric vehicles.
Yeah, good old 4-stroke sled, which brings us to the next topic. I just found out I'll be snowmobile guiding this winter again, so I'm super stoked and pumped. It's Bretton Woods, out of Bretton Woods, and White Mountain snowmobile tours. So we'll give you the link. I would recommend trying it because it is a lot of fun, and you just can't beat it. What we do is take people up over Jefferson Notch, up to Berlin and Wambach, and it's a great time. So if anybody's interested, keep it in mind.
Yeah, I have to book. I'm booking it this year. I'm going to get my brother. He'll be dependable, and he'll go with me. So
last season was weird, though. I mean, it was bad. It was a hard season to book because of the weather. But yeah, hopefully this season will be much, much better for snow. And speaking of that, there is a free safety class that Fish and Game is offering. We'll give you the link for that if you're interested in learning the safety surrounding use of a snowmobile. That's pretty handy.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend taking that because I think I don't track the snowmobile incidents as much as the hiking, but I would say in the height of winter you're averaging like 3-4 crashes a week, and they'll have some weeks where they've got like 6 or 7 people injured. So
yeah,
don't mess around.
Interesting. Anyhow, yeah, I'm psyched for winter. Oh my God, I'm psyched, and we'll be talking about that tonight. All that winter gear you need.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be covering that again. So, pop culture talk, Stomp. So this is where you get to add your new drop, right?
Woo! Yeah, we got a new one.
Yeah.
The real deal.
Hey, what's that sound? It must be time for the pop culture segment with Mike and Stomp.
So first thing we want to start off with here is Stomp is thinking about. So we're going to do a thing about Laconia and Weir's Beach. So you want to talk about classic arcade?
Oh
games?
My goodness, yeah, I was blown away. We spent the weekend. We went to a wedding down in Laconia, and just spent the entire Sunday exploring Weir's Beach, and then we went to Fun Spot and this and that. And Fun Spot blew me away, being an old school arcade game guy from the 80s. I mean, this place has hundreds and hundreds of vintage arcade games. And as I played and roamed around this place, I came to realize that it's actually associated with a museum and an organization that seeks to preserve all these old stand-up arcade games. So it's quite an amazing place. And it's called the American Classic Arcade Museum. And this place is, I feel like a late bloomer to a lot of this stuff. I've always known about Weir's Beach. I've always known about Fun Spot, but having gone to these places now, I'm blown away at how much history and just awesome culture there is in these places. So if you haven't gone, check it out. But I'm talking 40-year-old video games that I haven't seen in ages. I was like a kid again. It was incredible. But there's this one person in particular that's associated with the museum, and his name was Scott Gowlin. And he, back in like the mid 80s, before the whole, I don't know what happened to video games, but I think it was the introduction of, say, like the Commodore and the more advanced game systems and things like that, PlayStation, this and that, sort of killed video games. But this guy has a huge collection at Fun Spot, and he died of cancer back in 2011, I believe. And I don't know, you just got to go and see his stuff. It's incredible. But we have the link for the actual museum itself, and they're a nonprofit, so they take donations. And my biggest question was, how do they maintain all these games? Because I remember back in the day, these games would be broken or out of repair so often. So to have 300 plus old video games is amazing to me. So it's awesome, super cool. Have you ever been there?
I have been there, and I actually. The video game sort of area, the video game places in my area are actually, they've got very similar, like, there's 40-year-old video games on Hampton Beach. So Hampton Beach has an active arcade that has like a bunch of old games, and then Salisbury Beach has an arcade as well that has a bunch of these old games. So you can go in there and play like Galaga, Q*bert, Tempest.
Yeah,
they have the old Dragon's Lair, like all these old games are in there, and I don't know how they maintain them. I'm assuming that there must be some people that are sort of experts in maintaining these, and they have access to old parts and things like that. But a lot of these games are, they look a little like kind of worn, and the boxes on the outside are definitely like sort of bleached out by the sun and whatnot, but overall, like they're still working, and you can go to these places anytime you want. I've been to the one in Weir's Beach as well, and it's really cool.
Oh yeah, the smaller one there by the water. It's super cool. Yep. Yeah, it's amazing. Well, I mean, not only that, but the electricity costs to keep this place open. It's incredible. But anyway, Yeah.
I just wonder if we're like of a certain age where like we get excited about this, but like younger kids don't really care about these big arcade games. I don't really know.
Possible, but I mean, I think FunSpot is neat in the sense that they incorporate a bunch of other things like bowling and, they have a large room for birthday parties and this and that. So I think as a business, they're surviving aside from the video games. So anyway, yeah, great stuff. Really neat.
All right. So our next topic is the chess cheater. So we've been talking about this guy, Hans Niemann, who has been accused of cheating, supposedly by potentially putting like devices inside of himself and things like that. So this guy has finally, and I think the prime issue has been that the current world champion, Magnus Carlsen, has basically accused this guy of cheating. So Hans Niemann is suing Carlsen and some other folks. I'm assuming some folks that are involved with chess.com for $100 million in damages on the heels of this cheating scandal. So
yeah, interesting, huh?
Yeah, it is.
He's fighting back.
I think he's going to be in trouble. I think he's going to have a difficult time because they have, particularly on the online games, they've been able to analyze his moves on these computer games, and they have sort of standard ratings around like what percentage these chess masters hit as far as optimized moves compared to a computer. So if a computer will look at the board and say like, okay, this is the most optimal move, if you do it every time, you get 100%. Like most of these grandmasters can get up to about 65 to 75% optimized against a computer. Mm-hmm. And when they look at like Niemann's games on chess.com, I think he was consistently hitting like 75 or 85% of the optimized games, which typically is an indicator that you're using some sort of cheating.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't get away with anything today.
Yep. So we will follow the latest chess cheating news on this hiking podcast and keep you up to date.
Yeah, I just wonder, is that their only evidence against the player, though? An AI algorithm or just stats? Is that all they had?
I think the online cheating is a lot easier for them to prove versus the over the board. I don't know about the over the board cheating.
Interesting. Yeah, because they didn't physically find something on him, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
the in-person games, I don't think that they've physically been able to find anything on him.
Wow.
And Carlsen hasn't really done himself any favors because he like refuses to actually play him in an environment where presumably it would be more controlled. So it may be, maybe they would be better off doing like a pay-per-view thing where, they agree to be searched before going into a game. And I would pay to watch that at this point. I'm interested enough.
Yeah, me too. Well, yep. We'll see the court action on Law TV as well.
Yes, exactly. All right, so next topic here. Oh, Stomp, you want to do this, huh? So you've got one here.
I'm looking, we should keep it brief because we do have a lot to cover, but I am fascinated by this story. The whole TMZ confirmed that Twitter is a done deal with Elon Musk. I think that's pretty wild. Just in terms of how Twitter's operated, their behavior with censorship and this and that. We don't need to get on a rabbit hole with this, but let's keep a lookout to see how they treat Twitter now and Musk, because I'm sure that there will be certain parties involved that are going to do their best to destroy Elon and maybe even Twitter. Who knows? I don't personally like Twitter. I think it's a cesspool. I get the whole global, it's the soapbox for the world. I get it. But Twitter hasn't necessarily stood by that. I think the users were expecting that, and that wasn't necessarily the case. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with it.
Yeah, and I'm more concerned about, from an Elon Musk perspective, I'm much more focused on the work that he's doing with Starlink and SpaceX. I think those are much more important than anything to do with Twitter, which is just sort of, it is what it is. There's a million of these. You can go to Reddit, you can go to Facebook, You can go to Instagram, you do whatever you want. Twitter does basically the same. Twitter, for me, I've never really, I had an account for a while, I got rid of it just because I never used it, and it's just confusing to me. I can never figure out how these conversations are going on, and it seems like it's a bunch of people that are, influential within their own areas, that talk with each other. But I think the vast majority of people that are living life are not on Twitter. I think it's a very small type of thing, and it seems like there's just a lot of like toxicity around. If you don't do or say the right thing, you're going to get in trouble there. So I'm not very good at that stuff. But I do think that it is going to be interesting now that Elon Musk has taken over this platform. I think that a lot of times people will say, well, it's a private company, it can do whatever it wants. Now that the shoe has kind of flipped and they've got somebody in there that may not do what I guess you would say the mainstream folks want of Twitter, it'll be interesting to see how that can flip. And I always say that to people that are very political one way or the other. I'm much more of a moderate type of guy. Like anytime you've got something where, you feel like you're winning in a victory, like just remember that can flip and turn against you. So
yeah, no doubt about it.
Should be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, they made the bed and, Twitter's dealing with it. So
yep. Be very interesting. So we'll keep an eye on that. And then lastly, we've got House of Dragons is over. So first season is over. What an amazing season. So many high points, but like this last episode, what did you think, Stomp?
I was blown away, and I was expecting, I was wishing for that the longest night type of episode with the epic battle, but I just didn't know what was coming. But I was happy with how they ended it, and it really goes to show you how many seasons they're probably going to get out of this. I mean, I can't even imagine what's coming with all these dragons and all these houses, and I can imagine there's going to be a lot of CGI if they're going to have dragon battles and things, but I was just blown away with the story. I do have one complaint though. I still think that some of the writing is a little sloppy. Like, I don't want to, this is a spoiler alert here, but at the very end when Viserys' son was tormenting the other person on the dragon, I thought he was going for the kill, but I was wrong. I think the writing could have been a little clearer, and that happened a couple other times.
Well, that's and it's interesting because the source material doesn't explicitly talk about the fact that, so what you're basically talking about, and this is a spoiler, is that sort of Aemond, we call him Aemond One Eye, he basically, his intent with chasing after Lucerys was to sort of scare him and freak him out, but not to kill him. Mm-hmm. So it's this continuing theme that in the show, they're sort of giving you the inside information that the book doesn't give you, because the book is written from the perspective of speculation. So
really? Huh.
Yeah. So this whole thing is basically a war is going to start happening just because Aemond was trying to sort of like run Lucerys off of his bicycle onto the side of the road, but ended up running him into like an 18-wheeler and killing him. Is sort of like the equivalent of it. Yeah. And the same thing happened with Alicent in the last episode, where when King Viserys passed away, she confused him ranting about the prince who was promised with thinking that he meant that he wanted his son Aegon to become king. So it's all this like comedy of errors really that's happening to cause all this drama. Yeah,
it's Shakespearean in a way. It's good.
Yeah,
but anyway, I'm super disappointed. So they haven't even started filming the next season.
They haven't even cast Cregan Stark. So the older son, Jacaerys, is on his way to Winterfell. And there's they can probably do 2-3 episodes up at Winterfell with everything that's going to go on with Jacaerys and Cregan Stark, who's basically the king of the north, or the protector of the north up there. So I don't know when season 2 is going to take off. But yeah, they can easily do 5 seasons of this, I think.
Mm-hmm. Now, when is that Jon Snow spur coming on?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because that's probably much further along. So I'm anticipating that I'm never going to be deleting HBO Max.
I know. They're very sticky right now.
Yeah, they've got me roped in.
They're very sticky. All right. So sponsors and coffee talk, Stomp.
All right. So we have a brand new sponsor, which is super cool. And the sponsor's name is Fieldstone Kombucha. And I swear to God, I hope I'm saying that properly, but you're going to be hearing about them week to week here. And I've just tried it myself. I mean, kombucha is fermented drink, and apparently it's really good for your digestive system and this and that. And it's made out of organic black white tea, organic sugar. And this company is out of Bristol, Rhode Island, and they will basically deliver the product to you. And it's super, super cool. The contact's name is Emily, and she reached out to us thinking that we would be a great option for her to get this product out there. And apparently they listen to the podcast and are addicted to us. And I can tell you, I'm trying one of these now. I was going to save this for the drink section, but I'm drinking one of their kombucha that they sent out, and it's a Farm Dreams Spicy Ginger. And I'm not doing this because this is a sponsor. It's delicious. It's so great. So, yeah, we're going to put all the information up on the show notes, and I do have a little blurb that I wrote for them just to finish this up. So, New England's premier craft kombucha ships to New Hampshire. Check out Fieldstone Kombucha online for delicious seasonal flavors in a kombucha style beloved of skeptics and enthusiasts alike. The perfect non-alcoholic post-hike drink. Shipping available for retail and wholesale. For more information, contact Emily Sheridan at fieldstonekombuchaco.com or visit them at fieldstonekombuchaco.com. Yeah. And when, of course, we have Spinner's Pizza. Oh, let me backtrack. Mike, have you tried kombucha?
Yeah, I'm drinking it right now. So first of all, a couple things.
Yeah.
One is I had my daughter Megan. We went through and I pronounced kombucha like 17 times to get her approval to make sure that I was saying it correctly. So we were like up on the kitchen table and I was like, all right, I got a new sponsor. It's Fieldstone Kombucha. Did I pronounce it correctly? And she was like telling me no. And she's like, it's kombucha. And I was like, but it's not kombucha. And she's like, yeah, but you can't emphasize the A. Just say it quickly. And I was like, kombucha. And she's like, okay, that's okay. So kombucha. If I messed up the pronunciation, I'm blaming my daughter, Megan. But no, I'm drinking a lemon grass right now. So it's really good. It's smooth. Yeah. I was telling Emily when I talked to her, I was basically like, I tried kombucha from Trader Joe's like a few weeks ago. Yeah. And I actually didn't like it because it was very sort of acidic and bitter. And she was like, no, this stuff is a lot smoother. And she's like, I've heard that a lot. She's like, check it out, try it out. So I've tried a couple of different flavors, and I'm having the lemongrass. And it's definitely correct. It's very smooth.
Yeah.
And it's really good, actually.
All right, listen, since we're still talking about this, I'm going to go back. For all you lushes out there, me included, with, Sober October winding up here, there are several recipes that she provides as well. So you can mix gin and botanical, highball ginger, which is whiskey, and the Fieldstone Farm Dreams, which is that ginger. So, a lemongrass martini with vodka and Fieldstone's Heydays kombucha. So pretty neat.
Yeah, it's great. Good stuff. And I think I'm going to grab some time with Emily to do a short segment to get a little bit more background. So we'll throw that into a future episode too.
Yeah, let's do that. That sounds great. And we have Spinner's Pizza, best pizza in Andover, Mass. So when you're coming home from your hike, drop by. It's right off of Route 93 in Dascombe Road, Andover, Mass. EMS, your Northeast go-to for outdoor gear, guidance, education, and more since 1967. Check them out at ems.com. And, of course, a special thank you to at Rek-lis Brewing, where you'll enjoy the best food, craft beer, and fun just 15 minutes from Franconia Notch. Many 4K footers in less than 10 minutes from the Five Corners. Almost passed out on that one.
Seriously. Any coffee you want to share?
Oh, yeah. Let's see what we have here. We have... literally someone donated a coffee after seeing Mike speak at a town meeting. Do you want to tell me about this?
Oh, Jesus. I'm outed.
I got to hear
this
is
story. Funny. So Stomp sends me this like coffee and he's like, what the hell is this? So I was like, oh, geez. I didn't even want to get into the story, but I'm not politically inclined person. So, but every once in a while, like something will come up in my town that like, it'll get you fired up. So we have the street in our town called Main Street, right? So, Main Street, it's like the main road that goes through the town.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty common.
So like it's basically the best way for me to get from my house to get into Newburyport, where my daughter works and where I spend a lot of time, is to take Main Street. So Main Street happens to be like where all the $1 million homes in the town live.
Yeah.
And, you know, they get a lot of traffic. It's Main Street. That's sort of the purpose of it. But I guess some of the neighbors got together and decided that they had too much traffic that they wanted to deal with. And somehow they got the mayor of the town to get behind this idea that they were going to turn Main Street into a one-way street, so that would force everybody up onto this main highway road. So I was not pleased with this idea. So the town had like a public forum where you could speak. So I went and I just said, look, you know, you're forcing us to go into like a much more dangerous road, driving at a faster speed. It's a much nicer drive to go along Main Street and look at the river, and, you know, we pay taxes, and, you know, we shouldn't be privatizing a road for the benefit of just a few people. So I basically just went in and sort of gave my piece to the town.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny because the first thing I did is the first thing I said, because you could speak in the microphone, I was like, I've never been involved in a town political meeting before in my life, and it is as boring as I thought it was going to be. So everybody kind of cracked up at that. And then I went into my spiel, and then I was like, I'm done. Like, I didn't want to stick around and listen to a bunch of people just say what I had just said. So I was like, I got to go cook dinner. So apparently, as I was walking out, I said that to some guy. I was like, I got to go cook dinner. And it must have been whoever put this coffee in was like, you must be Mike from the podcast. I'm like, I don't know. He didn't say anything to me, but afterwards, it turned out that they recognized me. So
was it the I got to cook dinner comment? That's really funny.
Yeah. I was like, I'm out of here. I got to cook dinner. I'm not sitting around watching. And it's painful because these town meetings, like, you know, look, I wasn't even that eloquent. I was stumbling all over myself, and I kind of do this podcast stuff. So I thought I was going to be a little bit better than I was, but even I was like stumbling all over myself. But a lot of these people get up there, they get on the microphone, and they don't remember what they're going to say. They're reading from a script, and it's boring as hell. So I was just like, I said what I have to say. There's 100 people here. They got it covered. I'm going to leave.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah. You got to be active.
Yeah, I still don't know what they're going to do. It sounds like the mayor in our town still may be pushing it, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, good for you. It's good to see civic participation.
Yeah, I'm fighting against the man. All these rich people are trying to get a one-way road for their benefit. And I'm like, I want to drive on the rich people street. I want to go where the rich people are.
Yeah, right? There you go. Fight the power, man.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. We do have one other. Sarah donated 3, and she was listening while en route, tuned from the Catskills. So thank you, Sarah. Very cool. Very cool. And we have a few notable hikes. If you tag SLASR, we will consider you for Notable Hike of the Week. Steve Summits did Liberty and Flume. Full Strength Coffee did the Mount Cabot Loop. A Folsom 33. Let's see. Temperature Check with Great Sunset Shot. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was trying to emphasize the cold weather that day. Haley 76 did a sunrise from Franconia Ridge. Justin Benz did Mount Flume. And that's 20 out of 48 for his 48 4,000 footers. And this was another dad venture. And Jay Finley did 8 and 9 for Franconia Ridge. So right on, everybody. Good work.
Awesome. And I think this is a record 45 minutes before we even get to the show opening. But welcome to episode 80 of the Sounds Like a Search and Rescue podcast. This week we are doing a segment on the history of Laconia and the Lakes region. And we're also dusting off our winter gear list and sharing our advice on snowshoes, spikes, crampons, boots, backpacks, and all the associated clothes needed for winter hiking. We've covered some of this stuff before, but we'll do a recap for those of you thinking about getting into winter hiking. All this and some recent search and rescue news. I'm Mike.
And I'm Stomp. Let's get started.
Perfect. So we're going to skip the beer talk because we're both drinking kombucha.
Yeah. And we're going to skip the reason hikes because we haven't been hiking.
We haven't been hiking, but I got a little quick history segment. Stomp.
Let's dive into some White Mountains history, shall we?
because I wasn't hiking, I did go back, and I've been very painfully trying to make my way through Not Without Peril. So I picked this book up and put it down like multiple times.
Yep.
But I did find a chapter that I think is pretty cool, or not cool, but very interesting. And it's the chapter that tells the story about the two young UNH students that hiked the Presidential Traverse in 1994, I believe.
Yeah.
Jeremy Haas and Derek Tinkham. And this was a situation where Jeremy Haas was a somewhat experienced hiker. They both attended UNH. Jeremy was a hike leader for the Outdoor Adventure Club at UNH, who had done a couple of trips as a leader, had gotten people in trouble previously, and was basically, people complained about him and said, like, look, he was pushing us too hard. He was reckless out there. And, he did some things on these hikes that we didn't feel comfortable with. So he was actually removed as a hike leader from the UNH Outdoor Adventure Club. And he then proceeded to continue to hike. He basically quit the outdoor club from that point on, continued to hike. He convinced, at some point afterwards, whether it was a season later or sometime during that same season, he convinced another friend of his, so this is two 20-year-old friends, he convinced another person to do a Presidential Traverse with him. So they started typically as you would start up Valley Way. Mm-hmm. The choice that they made was not to bring a tent. They brought, winter bivy bags with them. Yeah. And they went pretty light with clothing as well. They were definitely of the mind of let's go light and fast. Jeremy was much more experienced. He claims that he told Derek, like, hey, this is going to be the most challenging physical thing you've ever done. You need to make sure that you're up for it, so on and etc. So they made their way up to Madison via Valley Way, went over to Adams. At some point, as they're making their way over to Jefferson, very close to Jefferson, Derek is not doing well at all. And Jeremy's moving forward. Now, I would imagine from the trip from Adams over to Jefferson, it sounds like that's when this kid Derek started kind of falling apart. Mm-hmm. Jeremy was pushing. And then by the time they got to Jefferson, Derek was basically done. He's like, I can't go on anymore. I got to go get into my bag. Conditions were worsening. It ended up being that winds were hitting 120 miles an hour and the wind chill was like insanely cold. Derek basically collapsed near the summit of Jefferson, and Jeremy basically decided to move on to Mount Washington, made his way to the observatory it took him like 4 hours. He basically left Derek there to die.
Did the one that was failing stop at the Thunder Junction there? Is that the story? All right, yeah. I remember the story. Yeah,
and then basically Jeremy made his way to the observatory, knocked on the door, they let him in. I think he was frostbitten on his hands, but otherwise okay. Derek basically was located the next day. The mountain rescue had to activate and make their way up to Caps Ridge. A number of the rescuers got in trouble as they were coming up. I think there was at least one or two of them that were in pretty bad shape. During the rescue, one guy I think had to turn back, but eventually they located the body. They were able to bring it down, but it was a real struggle to bring it down. And I think afterwards, some of the newspapers interviewed this Jeremy kid, and he didn't come off very good. He was basically like, Derek knew what he was signing up for. He knew that I told him that this was going to be dangerous, and he accepted the risk on his own. I think the feedback that I read on Not Without Peril and on some of the old View from the Top web message forums was basically that a lot of people felt that Jeremy should have been much more proactive around worrying about Derek's safety, and that they had a ton of bailout points that they could have got down to Gray Knob in a lot quicker time.
Oh, sure.
And they chose not to. And that a lot of people even to this day sort of feel like Jeremy is responsible for that situation.
Yeah, that's a shame. It's an awful story.
Yeah. So anyway, I didn't hike, but I did read.
Yeah.
1994.
Okay, so pretty recent.
Pretty recent, and they had some of the rescue team had been interviewed by the author of Not Without Peril, and one of the quotes by Jeremy in the newspaper was, do you regret anything? And his answer was, I wish I'd brought in mittens instead of my gloves. Nothing about like, geez, I wish I turned back and tried to get to Grey Knob, or even if I'm on the summit of Jefferson, I feel like I'd have to remember, but I feel like it would be quicker or safer to get back over to Grey Knob in that area versus making my way all the way over to Washington in those bad conditions.
Absolutely. It's a really confusing lay of land between Jefferson and Clay and Washington in bad weather.
You're so exposed too.
Oh yeah, that field is, I did that at night at one time during my hut to hut, and that field from Jefferson over is just so damn confusing at times. In bad weather, no thanks. Yeah, I definitely feel like you can get from that like Thunderstorm Junction area over to a much more sheltered area. Yeah. But again, who knows how much experience they had going up into those areas. Yeah, that's a tough one. Man, terrible. Yeah. Crazy story, but 1994. Hopefully, lessons we learned on that one. Mm-hmm. But anyways, Tom, so moving on to segment 1 here, you want to do a little Weirs Beach, Laconia history. So I'm going to let you take this. Yeah, like I said, I'm a late bloomer. I really had no idea how cool this area is. And, just to start off right from the top, why is this related to hiking? It's a hot spot, and it's local to many areas that you might want to hike. I mean, one of my favorite spots, and Mrs. Stomp's as well, would be Red Hill Fire Tower. You have the Gunstock Range, Mount Major, and I honestly, Mike, what's the traverse that starts in Alton at Mount Major and heads over? There's like, I couldn't find the name of this range, but there are several mountains. It's the Belknaps, and you basically, the sections that I've done is, you start at Mount Major, and then you make your way across all of these peaks, and the trails. There's just a lot of like sort of intertwined trails, but basically you go to Mount Major, then you can go out to what they call Straight Back Mountain, and then from there there's what's called Mount Anna, and then you can continue on to Mount Mac, and there's like a couple of different loops you can do. You can do like Mount Clem to Mount Rand, and I think I've done this big loop, and then you come over to West Quarry, and then back down through Mount Major. I have not done the northern range, which is like Gunstock, Belknap, and Piper in that area there. So that's on my list of places to go. But I actually prefer to hike this in the spring. So like when you're talking about like March, April, May, when there's still like a lot of snow or sketchy weather in the northern peaks. Mm-hmm. I really like the idea of getting down into the Belknaps. It sort of dries out much more quickly, and is a much more enjoyable place to hike in when the snow's melting, because it's usually like ahead of the higher peaks by maybe about 3 or 4 weeks when it comes to snow melt. Yeah, and then you also have Larkham, Faraway, and Shaw, and all those other peaks that are proximate to Weirs and Laconia. So there's just a ton of stuff to do. Obviously right now they're sort of closing down a lot of it because it's end of season, but there's a lot of hiking, and I mean this is like the go-to for Mrs. Stomp and I at the moment. It's amazing. But I did some digging on the history, and this area dates back like literally 8,000 years BC, when they had Native American tribes camping in the area. They would camp in the summers, and this is probably the most interesting fact about this spot. You have Winnipesaukee, Lake Winnipesaukee, and then you have Paugus Bay, and it's connected by a little brook or a channel. Now, this channel would never freeze, apparently. So the word weir means somewhat of a basket or something that the Native Americans would use to cross the channel and capture fish with. So they would lay out these weir baskets across the channel, and catch their food for the winter and whatnot. So it's really fascinating. You have earlier histories, 1652. You have the Governor Endicott of Massachusetts made his way up the Merrimack and came into the channel at Lake Winnipesaukee. They carved their initials on Endicott Rock, which is still there today. You can see this at a museum, and there's a monument there. You have the tourist era, which starts in basically 1848, where you have these multiple railroads making their way to the region. So the Boston, Concord, Montreal railroads all made connections to this spot. And then you had the development of grand hotels, which ultimately would burn down in 1924. And then you have the whole history of the large steamships. In 1849, you had the Lady of the Lake steamship, which made her port there at the Weirs. And this would continue on until 1893. In 1872, you had railroads coming in for, tourist railroads, like just regional tours. And they would see upwards of 60,000 passengers per year. It's pretty neat. So today, you still have the Mount Washington, which does the tours. You have the Winnipesaukee and Pemigewasset Railroad that does tours, and that's connected to the Hobo Railroad, which you may have seen in Lincoln. And I believe they have other locations as well. Is that over in Conway, if I'm mistaken? I'm not quite sure.
I think the Conway Scenic is a separate entity.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's just a little bit of the Weirs and what can you do there today? There's just so much to do. Obviously, there's the fun spot. There's the Mount Washington. When Mrs. Stomp and I made it there on Sunday, they had just finished their season, and on the Saturday night, they had a Halloween grand ball on the ship. It's amazing. So it's amazing. You have great food. You have the Tower Hill restaurant there, which is, it's more of it reminds me of like a country western bar, but they have live entertainment. You have fireworks. You have drive-in theater, golfing, horseback riding. Incredible. I mean, we'll give you the links. There's a lot to see, a lot to do, but I'm fascinated by it. And my biggest question is, why are there seagulls hundreds of miles away from the ocean? And that I have not figured out yet, but I hope to get to the bottom of that one.
Oh, there's seagulls in Winnipesaukee?
Yes. It's like minus the salt in the air. It's exactly like being at Salisbury Beach or any other waterfront place on the ocean. But there are seagulls there.
Well, there's scavengers, so there's got to be there's water and there's trash. So I think that's probably the attraction.
I would think so. Yeah, they live there, and I think they're there year round.
Yeah. And I think, again, just going back to, tying this into hiking, you've got the Belknaps that are on the southwest part of the lake. Then when you've got the kind of the northwest section of the lake, you've got the Squam Range, which is Morgan, Percival, and that range. And then to the northeast of the lake is the Ossipee Range, which is sort of like Lake of the Clouds. So you've got Mount Shaw, you've got Mount Roberts, you've got Black Snout, and that whole area there. So there's a lot of really amazing viewpoints of the lake from all of those different hikes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we just did Mount Webster a couple weeks ago, so you've got the overlook there, southern end of the Squam. So yeah, great point. I didn't add that because I thought it was just maybe a little too far from Laconia, but what's the difference?
Yeah, we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, Laconia is fun. My wife's cousin has a house right on the lake in Paugus Bay, I believe. Yeah. And it's fun to kind of go through. We go through that little bridge that gets you across from Weirs Beach, which is a fun thing to do.
That's the channel I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can see, like, eventually we get over like Governor's Island and that whole area there, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's so great. And I can't forget this. Next year is the 100th anniversary for Bike Week. So that's going to be a little wild.
Yeah, I've never been to Bike Week. Never been there.
I went once. I went during COVID, and it was a little weird. It was a lot calmer, but it's not exclusively bikes. It's also antique vehicles and some beautiful older cars. So yeah, that might be something to sort of pencil into your calendar. It's going to be a heck of a time.
Yeah, I'll pencil in my calendar to stay away. I'm all set with the crowds. So.
Okay, well, if you can handle Las Vegas, you could probably handle Laconia. But
True. Although I could only handle it for 2 days, but some people like that. It is interesting. Like, I don't have that in me. Like, there's some people that are just very happy being in like that sort of crowded environment, like going to a tailgate, going to like a sports game.
Yeah, I hate
being
it.
at a concert. Like, I don't have any of that in me. Like, I don't like being in those crowds. I'm constantly like, okay, where can I find a place where I can get away from everybody?
Yeah, same here. Yeah. So good stuff. Where's Beach?
Where's Beach?
SLASR's hiking topic of the week.
Very good. So on to segment 2, Winter Gear 101. So we got an email from a listener, and he had asked whether or not we could break down our winter gear for the audience. And I know that we did. I think it's episodes 31 and 32 or 32 and 33. It's basically intro to winter hiking. So we did a deep dive with Karen and Rebecca on their gear. So I'll relink those shows so that you can do a real deep dive. And I mostly just wanted to kind of go through a refresher of what's in my backpack, and then Stomp, you can add to it if you want as well. But winter hiking is coming up here, so you want to start thinking about what gear you're going to be using and what your approach is going to be for winter hiking. In particular, if you're new to winter hiking, a couple of things I wanted to cover before we get into the gear is just sort of your management around trailheads and the road situation in the whites and parking and that whole thing is much different than it is in the summertime. So you've got to deal with oftentimes trailhead parking lots that may not be plowed, or they may be semi-plowed. You've got to deal with roads that are closed. So normally a hike that you could get right on the trail on might require a 2 or 3 mile road walk. So you have to factor those in. So you always want to assume the worst. I always tell people, make sure that you have a car battery charger that's available, either that or at minimum jumper cables, but don't rely on somebody else to be around to jump your car. Mm-hmm. Make sure you have a shovel. I would say ideally if you're in a car, don't mess around with 2-wheel drive cars. If you're going to go deep, make sure you get 4-wheel drive. Make sure you have like a snow rake for clearing off your car. And then I always sort of have like a piece of wood or something that I can jam under my tires just in case I get in trouble with something. So just keep that in mind, that you definitely want to have your like sort of at the trailhead emergency kit. Yeah,
your foot mats work pretty good too.
yeah, exactly. Like the car mats or whatever you need to get some traction. And you just can't rely on anyone else being around. And especially like, if you're going hiking and it's snowing out or something, like you might come back and your car may have a foot of snow on it, and conditions can be completely different than when you left.
Yeah, I've not done the battery pack in the car, but I could understand that being handy. I mean, I just sort of default to having a good battery. Up here, you got to have a killer battery. Yeah. Unlike
me, who just like doesn't pay attention to it and like just lets my battery die.
Yeah, I like there are some good options though. I wonder if that like Jackery brand might be decent. They power the mixer here, my DJ stuff, for hours. So yeah, there's some good affordable battery packs for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so keep that in mind. And then with your personal electronics, I always recommend that you bring a battery backup, like the Anchor battery backup. Make sure that you're cracking open hand warmers I usually will open my hand warmers like 10 minutes before I get to the trailhead. I'll shake them out. I'll leave them in my car seat, and then they're nice and warm by the time I start. I'll stick a hand warmer or two inside a plastic bag and wrap my phone in there. Make sure you keep your electronics close to your body. Don't rely on electronics if you can. Make sure you get a paper map and all that stuff. But just basically, just don't expect that your phone's going to stay alive if you don't have any sort of strategy to have like a backup battery or hand warmers or something to keep it warm.
Yeah, those toe warmers work really well. They stick to your phone, so that's been a lifesaver for me. That's sort of like the first thing I do before I get out.
Yeah, and I like any sort of coats or fleece jackets that have like those chest pockets.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll typically use that to put my phone in, and then I usually use the hand warmers. I'll put one hand warmer on either side of the phone and then leave it at that. So
yeah, and minimize use. Just don't use it so much.
Yeah, exactly. I like to take pictures though, Stomp. I like to take selfies
for the gram.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to start. So with gear, I want to start off basically what I use is whenever you're thinking about gear, like start with the traction. So starting from the bottom and working our way up, I guess. So you've got three main types of traction. You've got what you call micro spikes, you've got snowshoes, and you got crampons. So micro spikes, basically the two most common brands you're going to be dealing with are going to be Cthulhu micro spikes, which are basically a rubber gasket that wraps around your boots or whatever footwear you have, and it's got metal cleats on it that are sort of rounded but semi-sharp that will give you traction on any level of ice. Those are typically pretty good for trails that are already packed down and you're walking bare boot. They're pretty good for standard ice that's not sort of long and extended and steep. And you typically want to make sure that you got some backup gear for those. I typically will either bring like zip ties just in case they break. I'll bring like a little clamp that I can squeeze metal back together to help me with, because they do tend to break. The second type of spike that you will see is hill sounds. Hill sounds tend to be a little bit more aggressive. They're sort of in between what we call a micro spike and a crampon. I feel like they're starting to get more and more popular because they're sort of the best of both worlds, and they let you have a little bit more comfort if you're dealing with like steeper ice or more extended or aggressive situations. So I think you tend to use hill sounds over micro spikes, right?
I do, because the tooth on the cleat tooth is so much bigger and longer. It just it gets you over glare ice and this and that. I think like the Cthulhus tend to, I use Cthulhus, but it'll be earlier in the season or below tree line, that type of thing. But the hill sounds are just, like you said, just all encompassing. They tend to work great on everything.
Yeah. So I'd say like everybody should be wearing spikes. I typically will keep 2 pairs of spikes over the course of a season. You can sharpen them. You got to be kind of careful with them, because if you're aggressive with them, the metal's soft, and you can really damage them if you're too aggressive. But like a quick hit with the Dremel tool, or more preferably, I think, is sort of a hand sharpener. Typically with the micro spikes, they're much more rounded, whereas the hill sounds are more sharpened, I think.
Yeah. And I've messed around with sharpening with my Dremel, and I do think there's a science that we do not fully understand in terms of angle and this and that. These companies have done their homework, because when you start fiddling with the sharpness and this and that, your traction does alter. I've found that for sure. So I think when you get to the point where you're whittling down your spikes with a Dremel, it's probably time to get a new pair.
Yeah, and they're not super expensive. I think Cthulhu's and Hill Sounds are somewhere in the $80 range, so it's almost better off just sucking it up and buying a new set, and then using the old pair as what we call rock spikes, which is sort of like when the season's ending, you'd use those, and you don't care that you're banging them up. But
absolutely.
So the second type of traction that you're going to want is snowshoes. I use MSR Evos, which are sort of the most basic version of MSR snowshoes that you can get. You can get more expensive versions. Typically, what differentiates the basic snowshoes from more advanced snowshoes is that the more advanced snowshoes will have what we call an ankle lift or a televator. And basically what this is just sort of a metal piece that flips upward that gives you a better angle when you're going upward. Basically what it'll do is it'll give you like an inch or two lift on your ankle so that when you're going uphill, it feels like you're actually walking straight. So it's definitely beneficial. I just have used the same pair of Evos for the last 5 or 6 years. There's other brands. There's Tubbs version of snowshoes. All the main brands I think work pretty well. But what you really want to do is make sure that you've got a true mountaineering snowshoe. So MSR, Tubbs. There's a couple of other brands that I'll link in the show notes. But mine have worked pretty rock solid for the last. I think I've had the same pair for 5 years now.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
me too. I have the I have the Denali Classic, old school. I mean, they're the only complaint I have is the binding system. It's an old ratchet system. I'm intrigued by the new Bower system, which is just more of a cable system that you can twist a little knob and it tightens right up, and press the knob and it loosens right up. So,
yeah, and my snowshoes are the old sort of plastic strap MSR.
Yeah, me too. Yep.
And they're fine. The thing that I recommend for people is that they come with clips, and typically, like out of the box, if you get these old MSRs, they'll typically have like one clip to maintain the straps. And I typically will recommend that people get extra clips and double up on the clips, so you have one on either side of your foot. And that way you've got like your straps won't flap around, and then you also have an extra if you need it or somebody else breaks, you've got extra. And then I always take zip ties. Zip ties can be helpful if you need to adjust your straps on snowshoes. They are helpful if your gasket breaks on your micro spikes. And typically you want to plan on carrying both snowshoes and micro spikes, hill sounds, on every hike that you do. That's basically the kind of the go-to assumption is that snowshoes and micro spikes will be on every hike. Typically, if a trail is packed down really well, especially like if it hasn't snowed for like 4 or 5 days and you're hiking on a Sunday at a popular place, probably able to get away with micro spikes. You might even be able to get away with like leaving your snowshoes in the car. Typically, like from an etiquette perspective, people will expect that if the trail is anywhere like loose snow or anything like that, the expectation is that you should wear snowshoes to keep the trail packed down. If you are going to use micro spikes and you are like sinking in on a trail, what's going to end up happening is that you're going to leave footprints behind, and then if it rains or it warms up and then freezes back over, those leave what's called post holes, and people get mad about it. Personally, with a post hole, I feel like if you're carrying snowshoes and you're dealing with a trail that's got a bunch of post holes in it, it doesn't really matter, because with the snowshoes, you're going to go right over them anyway.
Sure. Makes sense. Yeah, the only qualification to this is that if it's like pre-season and it's just like an inch or two, just stick with your spikes. Yeah, there's no reason to drag out your snowshoes. But once you're in the heat of winter, then yeah, it's a good idea to have them.
Yeah. Exactly. And then the last bit of traction is crampons. So crampons are what you would think of for like true mountaineering. So these are aggressive spikes that strap onto your boots. I use, there's a bunch of different brands. Black Diamond has some. I use what's called the Gravel G5, which is a pretty inexpensive crampon. I've had the same pair for like probably about 5 or 6 years. Typically, you won't need to use crampons unless you're in a situation where you're hiking like the Northern Presidentials and you're dealing with like crampons typically would be used if you're going up a traditional mountaineering route like Lion's Head or something like that. You're typically, instead of using snowshoes, you'll break out a trail using your crampons versus snowshoes in those really steep winter mountaineering routes. And then if you're going up like a trail, like I went up Airline last winter and it was like crazy ice for like, a half a mile of ice steep. That's the type of environment where you would want to use crampons, when it's been a lot of melt and then a lot of ice that doesn't have any snow on it and you're exposed. That's when you would use really aggressive crampons.
Yeah, and make sure you know how to use them. Don't just buy them and go for a hike. You need to practice walking with them sideways, forward, not catching your leg with the teeth of the crampons. You can really hurt yourself. You can stumble and trip and get yourself in a really bad situation. So just make sure you know how to use them for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good point, because the first time I used crampons, I was hiking up Lowe's Path. We were going up to Gray Knob Cabin, and I didn't know. It was the first time winter hiking. I had crampons on, and I didn't realize that when you step off of that's another thing you'll deal with if you haven't done winter hiking, is there's this thing called the monorail, which is like the pack down section of the trail. Yeah. If you step off of that a little bit, you can sink. And I actually was wearing crampons. I sunk up to like my thigh. And then your natural instinct is to like dig in from one foot to the other, and I actually ripped my leg wide open with my crampons, like right at the very start of the hike. So you got to be very careful with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a bloody mess the whole weekend. It was a disaster.
So you actually dug into your skin.
Yes, yeah. And I pretended like nothing happened because I was too embarrassed to like tell anyone that I did it.
Yeah, because I have plenty of holes in my pants because of the damn things. Like you end up face planting if you're not careful.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. So moving on to backpacks. So my advice on backpacks. So I have two different winter backpacks. I've got a 50-liter Deuter backpack that I used for years. I recently upgraded to a Hyperlight Mountain Gear. I think that's what it's called. The Hyperlight backpack, which is a 50-liter. I use that for like summer backpacking, and I typically will use that for winter hiking, day hikes. It's got plenty of room. I can strap my snowshoes to it pretty well, and I've got everything pretty much dialed in there. But I would say any backpack that's between 35 and 55 liters will do you good. I just prefer to have a little bit more room, because in the winter conditions, I don't like to mess around with like having stuff crammed into my backpack. I prefer to have a little bit of extra space.
Yep, I agree. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm using my giant 115 right now already, just for the space. And as I go into the season, it gets a little more cramped and tighter, but right now it's great. It's just easier to get stuff.
Yep. Yeah, Stomp doesn't mess around with the backpack size. He's got a huge backpack, but search and rescue is a little bit different.
Little.
But yeah, any backpack will do. You've got the typical brands: Osprey, Gregory, Deuter. These ultralight packs from like Granite Gear, and take your pick. Anything will do. I do see a lot of people more and more utilizing the running backpacks even in the winter. I haven't looked at the fast pack, so I have a fast pack 25 liter. I think that they sell a bigger version of the fast pack that you might be able to get away with. Again, I just much prefer to have a little bit bigger backpack so that I can fit all my gear into it without messing around. But you could certainly stuff everything that I'm talking about into a 35 liter and still get away with it. It just would be crammed in there.
Yeah, that'd be tough.
Yep. As far as boots go, I typically would recommend any kind of winter boot that has a 400 gram Thinsulate rating. And right now I am using Keen Revel 4s, but basically any brand of like Keen, Merrell, Salmon. There's a bunch of different brands. If you go on Section Hiker, that's typically what I'll go on, and you just Google like top 10 winter hiking boots for men and women, and you can get all the brands. But ultimately, what you want is, I think, a real boot. I don't mess around with the trail runners in snowy conditions, but a real boot, I prefer to have something that's got a little bit of width on it. You do want to make sure that there's a hook on it for the gaiters, and ideally, like I said, 400 Thinsulate is the rating that I would use for cold weather. It'll keep your feet nice and warm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I always remind people, like, don't tie your boots super tight. Circulation's critical for keeping your feet warm in the winter. So you're much better off keeping your boots a little bit looser than you think, so that your circulation keeps flowing with your within your feet.
Yeah, good point.
Yep. Next thing you want to consider is gaiters. So gaiters are these things that sort of wrap around your boots and your pants, and what they'll do is they'll keep the snow out of the top of your boots. And typically you want to use like a Gore-Tex gaiter. You can use like a nylon gaiter. It really depends on what you want to do. I prefer the Outdoor Research. I think they're called crocodile gaiters. I think that's what I have. You have another version. I forget. You have like a nice black and orange pair.
Yeah,
I would. Hillsound.
I would. I went with the Hillsound Armadillo LT Gator, and it's listed now for like $69. When I bought it, it was like in the 30s. It was the cheapest gator there, but it fits perfect and it hugs your calf and it doesn't sag. That's my biggest complaint about gaiters. They drop, and I have found that the Hillsounds are sort of firm enough. They reinforce the zipper, and it just seems to keep the gaiter up by your knee, which is super important.
Yeah, and that's my big issue with you'll get these gaiters off of like Amazon. They're like more of a nylon, like raincoat type of material.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that will drop down because they're not stiff enough to sort of stand up on their own. But like yours are like really good that way.
They're
and
decent.
Then the Outdoor Research ones that are Gore-Tex, those don't tend to drop either because they're sort of a much stiffer material.
Yeah.
So that's why I do prefer like anything that's sort of Gore-Tex version of gaiters tends to not sag like you're talking about.
Right. My Hillsounds have gone on to probably 6 years now. One pair.
Oh, yeah. I remember when you got those.
Yeah. And I got those up in Lincoln at Lahoots. They have a great selection, by the way. Actually, that's something we should talk about at some point before we stop, is where can you get this stuff in New Hampshire?
Yeah. I mean, obviously like Eastern Mountain Sports, Lahoots, plenty of places that you can go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So moving on to some other stuff, jackets. So typically when I recommend, and again, anytime I think about this stuff, I want to give a shout out to my friend Jonathan, who showed me the ways of winter hiking. I owe him a debt of gratitude for infinity for this stuff. But typically what you want is 3 jackets. I typically will bring a fleece jacket or a soft shell jacket. So I think for my fleece, I have just like a regular old zip fleece. It might be a Columbia or something like that. If I bring the fleece, then I'll keep the soft shell home. If I bring the soft shell, I'll keep the fleece home. But I have a soft shell jacket that is I think it's an Outdoor Research Ferocity jacket, and it's a soft shell material which works out nice. I typically will bring that as my first layer. And then I have a down jacket. So I use an Eddie Bauer Evertherm jacket, but anything will do. I think Patagonia's got good nano puff jackets. Mountain Hardware's got the Ghost Whisperer. You've got all kinds of any kind of down jacket you can imagine. And then typically the third would be a shell. So I have an Eddie Bauer, I think, backcountry shell. Stomp. You have a really nice like camo shell that you use, right?
Yeah, that was a gift by a friend of mine, but that was military grade Gore-Tex from his days in the service. But that outer shell is key. It's not necessarily insulated, but if you can keep that wind off you in the rain or the rain, then you're in great shape if you have a decent mid or first layer on. Yeah,
exactly. So that's typically, like I said, I recommend 3 jackets. The fleece/soft shell, and then the down jacket, and then the regular hard shell. And typically you'll have all 3 of those on if you're above tree line and windy conditions. But a lot of times, all 3 of those jackets may be sitting in your backpack. That's why I always tell people, like, make sure that you have plenty of room in your backpack, because a lot of times when you're generating heat going uphill, you're going to be in a base layer, which typically for base layer for me is like a long sleeve. I got a bunch of these just shirts from Eastern Mountain Sports. I've got some REI ones. I've got some Columbia ones. whatever works for base layer is fine. I typically prefer to have like a wicking base layer, nothing cotton, obviously, and then same thing with the long underwear, and usually serves me pretty well.
Yeah, and my only comment on that outer layer again is spend the money. It's important to have the ventilation. If you can get a really decent jacket with, armpit zips or side zips, you can really keep yourself warm and dry, keep the wind off of you, but also let that condensation and heat out so you're not getting soaked underneath. That's really important.
Yeah, the heat regulating your sweat is like the most important thing for people. You don't want to generate a lot of sweat in your base layer. Obviously, like you want a wicking base layer, but you don't want to get soaking wet when you're hiking in the winter. That's your biggest risk, because that's when hypothermia can really creep in. The other thing about like the layers is if you're going to stop anywhere, you want to make sure that you put your layers on immediately to retain that heat if you're not moving.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Gloves, sort of the same concept as the jacket. I bring 3 layers. So you want a liner glove. I typically will bring like a wool like rag mitt, or a sort of a mitt with finger holes in it, and then my outer layer will be a outdoor research Gore-Tex shell. So again, it's like the liner gloves, which you're using most of the time. Then I use the mittens, wool mittens, and then the outdoor research Gore-Tex shell. Sometimes I'll swap it out and I'll bring like these heavy duty Eddie Bauer like work gloves. Yeah, as well, and I'll use those sometimes, but I'll typically bring like a couple of liner gloves with me too, because those do get sweaty and you want to swap those out.
Sure. Yeah, I prefer mittens myself, just for that fact of having that room and better circulation. Yeah. And can I just say one other thing? We haven't mentioned the fact that you should have probably a couple options for shirts. If your shirt gets soaked, you want to have a second backup, but you need a place to put your damp stuff. So whether you have like a dry bag or a trash bag, have a location in your pack that you can put your wet stuff that won't get your dry stuff soaked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I will typically bring like multiple pairs of gloves, and that's a good point. Like I'll typically have like just a little like stuff sack that I'll dump all my old junky gear into.
Yeah.
So
little tips.
As far as hats go, typically like I'll bring like 1 or 2 hats with me. I typically will bring like a wool hat. There's nothing in particular like that you have to worry about. Any sort of warm hat will do. I actually prefer to bring a headband with me. So I've got some nice sort of headbands that will go over my ears, but they'll keep the top of my head cold. And a lot of times like I'll keep the headband on, and then when I get too hot, I just pull it down around my neck, and it just stays there, and I can just pull it back up, and then I really don't use the full hat unless I'm above tree line or I'm getting really cold.
Yeah. Oh, I get too hot with a hat. That's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's why I like the headband, is I can start off like, I don't like my ears cold.
Yeah.
But like, so I'll start off with the headband, and then once I'm warmed up, I'll take the headband around my neck. And then if I get cold again, I can always just pull up the headband, but like, I don't like messing with the hat too much.
You know what's neat? Like Minus 33 makes a really great beanie. There are other brands out there, but Minus 33 makes a nice one. Beanies are nice because they're not heavy like a thick wool hat. They're super tight. Even the White Mountain Endurance crew had great beanies, and that keeps the heat in.
Yeah, and that's mostly what I use. Like with my hat, it's a beanie. It's not a heavy. So if I have my headband and then I have a beanie, like that's basically all I need. And then if I get really cold, I can put my hood on my down jacket too.
Yeah.
Other stuff that you want to think about is you always want to have goggles with you. Typically with goggles, you want to make sure that you keep those cold and in your bag. or sort of I tend to put them in the top of my backpack if I can, but keep them cold until you're ready to put them on, because what you don't want to do is put goggles on it's not like skiing where you put them on your forehead, and you don't want to have them on your forehead where you're generating heat, because what's going to happen is condensation is going to build up on the inside of the goggles. You get above tree line, you go to put them on, you can't see, you basically have no goggles. So you always want to keep them cold. I do tend to, if I need to, I will scrape out the ice on the inside if something works out. If I'm doing something like Northern Presidentials and I know I'm going to be up above tree line for an extended period of time, I'll bring 2 pairs of goggles just as a backup.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was like my one comment I was ready to throw in there. 2, yep. Absolutely 2.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Balaclava, something around your neck that goes into your, covers your nose and whatnot. Absolutely take 2 of those if you're going to be out all day, because the first time you use it, it's going to be full of snots and sweat and all kinds of nasty.
Yeah.
Yep. And then I always recommend make sure you got sunglasses on. You don't always need to have goggles. Like if you're above tree line and it's really nice out and there's not a lot of wind, you don't need to put your goggles on, but you will need sunglasses. The sun reflecting off of the snow can be devastating, and you can go snowblind if you don't have protection for your eyes.
Yeah. Or you can have a bunch of floaters like me when in your 50s because you never wore glasses.
Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of the big ticket items there. And like I said, I'll link all this stuff in the show notes. And then as far as like food and drink goes with liquid, you want to make sure that when you bring water, that you purchase like an insulation sleeve for your Nalgene. Outdoor Research sells these, so you can pick them up pretty easily with like an insulated sleeve. I typically will fill my water up with like hot water to start off with, put it in the insulation, and it'll stay pretty warm through the beginning of your hike. I typically will also bring a thermos with me of hot liquid. That's more so as a safety tool, just in case like somebody's suffering from hypothermia or something like that. I'll save that for emergency purposes. Sometimes I'll have half of it when I get up top and I'm not moving. But yeah, you definitely want to make sure that you don't let your liquid freeze. Correct.
And that leads me to a little trick that the Teal Goat taught me, and it's awesome. If you have a Nalgene bottle, if you keep it upside down, the bottom freezes first, so the spigot where you drink from is not going to freeze. So that's a really simple, just based on natural physics. So if you keep it upright, that cap can freeze unless it's in a protective cover or something of that nature. Yep,
that's it. And then couple of other sort of basic things that you have to be aware of with winter hiking is sometimes you will have to break trail. Typically, if you are out there and it's just been a fresh snow, you'll be responsible for breaking trail. If you're in a group and you've got to break trail, typically what you want to do is rotate through. So you, just like the Tour de France, you'll have somebody breaking trail in the beginning, 2 people walking behind them. Those 2 people have a nice easy time. First person should step aside, let the other 2 people start, breaking trail. So you're constantly sort of rotating forward on who's doing the work for breaking trails. That way you're saving energy. You want to make sure that if it is a day where it's a recent snow, bring your snowshoes. Don't just post hole with micro spikes. The only time that you should be sort of breaking trail without snowshoes is if you're doing like a real mountaineering trail, like Lion's Head. They'll open that up with like crampons. Typically, it's a better way to do it. It's safer just because of the steepness. But that's it. I recommend finding a friend that's got winter hiking experience so that you can start off slow and they can teach you sort of all the gear that you need. And take a look at like the hiking buddies groups to see if there's any sort of beginner hiking trips. I am going to post a hike with Mike trip for the winter on either like Welsh Sticky or Moosilauke, so I'm going to put that out there on the hiking buddies group this week. Nice. To see, and I'm going to basically just say like anybody that hasn't done winter hiking that wants to learn to do winter hiking can come with me to do a day of like sort of learning.
That'd be fun.
Yep. So keep an eye out for that. We'll see if anybody wants to hike with me. I don't know. Maybe they won't.
Oh, I bet.
Yep.
I have one final addition. What should you have in your pack if you get injured? I have a couple items. Foam pad so that you're not laying down on snow, getting cold really, really fast. I carry 2 of those hand-sized bivy sacks. They cover your body. They reflect like 80-90% of your heat back. When I go on missions, that type of thing, I will actually have a tarp in my bag and a couple connector bungee straps and that type of thing just to make shelter out of the wind. Some people I know have bothy bags, which are like those kindergarten parachutes that you can pull over yourself and make an enclosed tent. Any comments on that, Mike?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Is those sort of the Thermarest easy rest pads, those closed foam pads, important. Like those will, they're a lifesaver. Like that gives you, that along with those emergency bivy from Solo that you're talking about, like that can give you 6 to 8 hours of survival time in a winter situation to give search and rescue time to get to you.
For sure.
Versus if you don't have a foam pad, you sit down in the snow, regardless of what clothes you have, you're going to be exposed to cold, and your body's going to get cold very quickly. So that little bit of insulation that a foam pad gives you will be significant. You always want to use that when you're sitting down. And the emergency bivy is huge as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're not even touching upon backpacking, but if you're backpacking, hopefully you would have a stove and propane, and that's a whole other topic. But those are the basics. Yeah. I mean, even if you're going out with people in the winter, just have that stuff with you.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, too, is one other thing I would say, Stomp, is there are times where I will bring the 0 degree sleeping bag on a day hike.
Oh, yeah, sure.
If you're in a situation, like I remember me and my friend Tom, who he just finished his 4,000 footer. Like we did a hike up Jackson one time where the weather was so cold. I think it was probably it was colder than the time that me and you did that Liberty Flume Traverse.
Yeah.
It was like the wind chill was insane. And I just brought it because I was like, you know what, just in case something happens, like it's going to be so cold, like people could, get in big trouble within an hour or two. So I brought my 0 degree bag thinking that I've got my insulation, my ground insulation, I got a sleeping bag. If something happens to either one of us, that's going to give us 4 to 8 hours of survival time, which is what we need.
Yeah, and they're so light. It's like literally some of these newer bags are so light.
Yeah, I mean, well, mine's pretty heavy, but even like if I'm doing like a day on like Adams and Madison or something like that, like I may bring my 0 degree bag in my pack just in case, because not even just for me, but just thinking like, okay, if somebody else is in trouble, this gives them the extra time that they might need to survive for a search and rescue team to get to them.
Yeah. Great stuff, man. And just, we can go on forever with this, but I always have a locator beacon. I don't use the inReach or anything like that, but with the sketchiness of the phones and how quickly they can die, I do have a means to contact rescue if I need it.
Yep.
So, good stuff.
Good stuff. So we'll include links to the old shows that we did with Karen and Rebecca that have a much more detailed gear list, and those will also be like there's more hints about like clothes and ideas for women as well, because unfortunately, like me and Stomp are not women, so I can't really get too specific about that. But Rebecca and Karen were really helpful about like ideas for that, and Rebecca posted some articles that she's written in the past, so she can definitely point you the way for clothes.
Hey, listen, we're getting tight. Do you want to just do like the highlights of these search and rescues?
Yeah, why don't we do the local stuff and we'll wait for the national stuff for next show?
Sounds good.
Okay. So this first story here, unfortunately, is regarding a deceased hiker that passed away, and I am waiting for the link to work here, Stomp.
Yeah, it was up in the Hancock region, Cedar Brook Trail. This was last Saturday morning. We had a training going on concurrently that started that morning, and halfway through the training, we were interrupted by a call. There was somebody in medical distress on Cedar Brook Trail. Long story short, this ended up being a recovery, and a New Hampshire Air National Guard helicopter was requested, but once the rescuers arrived on scene, it was too late. So the Army National Guard was actually diverted to another emergency at Mount Avalon. If you want to take over.
Yes. Yeah. So, I guess apparently they had another medical emergency on Avalon but there's no. The problem, Stomp, is there's no detail about the Mount Avalon rescue in this.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure.
So there's nothing for me to take over.
I apologize for that.
No problem.
Well, I'm not going to add information that may not be public at this point, but I do know that the second was not a recovery. It was just an orthopedic situation, I believe. So,
yeah.
But interesting day all around. That's all we really know.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, we were just talking about like that Cedar Brook Trail and like Thoreau Falls in that area. I mean, that just doesn't get a lot of traffic. So I would imagine that this person was probably a pretty hardcore hiker if they were out in that area.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very deep, remote area for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately. Okay, so then the next one here is an injured hiker on Mount Chicora. This happened on Saturday, October 22nd, shortly before 5:30. Fishing game was notified of an injury on Champney Falls Trail. So this was a 36-year-old gentleman from Massachusetts hiking with a group of 6 friends. Around 4:15, they were descending the trail from the summit when this gentleman injured his ankle. So they were about 2.5 miles from the trail. That side of the Kank is difficult because there's no cell service up there. Mm-hmm. So it looks like 2 of the members had to hike out and they drove to service. So it's very difficult. Like you're on that Champney Falls trailhead, you basically have to hike out and then drive down to the junction of the Kank and Route 16 in order to get cell connection. So you don't get any cell connection on the Kank at all until you get out to Conway.
Yeah.
So
wow,
that sucks. So a passing hiker, I guess, was able to assist the victim by splinting his ankle, and the victim was able to attempt to move down the trail, but he didn't make significant progress. So, it happened around 5:30 or so that the fishing game got notified. So it took 45 minutes for fishing game to get notified because the original injury happened at 4:15. The conservation officers and mountain rescue and lakes region search and rescue were able to get to the hiker, stabilize his injury, and get him on a litter. They didn't get him back to the trailhead until 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
So, I mean, think about that. Like, this was in probably cold conditions, but think about how long that would be in the winter with, like, freezing cold conditions. Like, having that ground pad under you would be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Crazy.
Yeah. So, and then Stomp, as we are talking, I actually was able to pull up the news article about the rescue on Mount Avalon. So it is out there.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yep. So this happened on same day. So all 3 of these happened on October 22nd. The hiker on Mount Avalon is a 54-year-old gentleman from Maine, and he was hiking with a religious group for the day. And they had ascended Mount Avalon and were coming down from the summit when this gentleman misjudged a steep section of the trail and took a fall.
Yeah.
He was not able to walk down the trail. So that top section of Avalon is steep.
Oh,
so, yeah, PEMI Search and Rescue and New Hampshire Army National Guard were called in to see if they could assist. The Guard sent a flight crew to the location around 2:40, and they were able to place the victim into a litter and hoisted him into the helicopter to get him to the Crawford Notch Visitor Center. And eventually he was transported to Littleton Regional High School Healthcare. So that's about it. But luckily he was, the helicopter was already in the air, and they were able to divert over to him. He was injured at 1:40 when the call came in, and then he was picked up by the helicopter by 2:40, so 1 hour.
Okay. Oh, nice work.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been a busy year. I can say that.
Sure has.
If you have no other comments on that, I do want to just touch upon one of those national stories because it's just too unusual to pass. Then we can clean the slate. Do you mind?
Sure.
All right, this is a great one. So tourists rescued after being stuck underground at Grand Canyon Caverns. So 5 people were rescued Monday night, and this is dated October 25th, after being stranded 200 feet underground at the Grand Canyon Caverns when an elevator broke down. So they were 21 stories underground, and apparently there were many elderly people that just could not walk back up the flight of stairs, the emergency stairs. So they had to send search and rescue to go get these people out, and apparently they were using rescue buckets and whatnot to pull some of these folks out. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I didn't even know there was like these caverns or elevators and stuff like that. I don't know where this is in the Grand Canyon, but yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and apparently there is actually like this deepest, darkest, quietest hotel room in the world, which is $1,000 a night down there. It's just all kinds of neat information that I never considered before. But anyway, you don't hear about people getting trapped in the Grand Canyon elevators too often.
I would have if I had that hotel room, I would have let those old people like share a bed. I would have said, you can take one of my beds. Yeah, I'll take the pull-out sofa. You can take the king-size bed.
It's so funny. All right, man. Well, number 80, 20 more to go before 100 episodes. Yeah. Holy moly.
Yeah, and Stomp, by the way.
Yeah.
That is truly a tourist trap.
Oh.
I did one. I did a dad joke.
That's awesome. Look, I'm choking after that one. After all the jokes I dropped on Larry the Log, I'm like in that, when 11 on Stranger Things uses her powers and then collapses. I'm in that collapse mode right now. But nice job. That was a good one. Damn.
I'm proud of me.
You should be. Get it, but for sure.
All right. We are out of here.
All right.
Until next time.
Bye.
Very good.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to learn more about the topics covered in today's show, please check out the show notes and safety information at SLASRpodcast.com. That's SLASR podcast.com. You can also follow the show on Facebook and Instagram. We hope you'll join us next week for another great show. Until then, on behalf of Mike and Stomp, get out there and crush some mega peaks.
Now covered in scratches, blisters, and bug bites, Chris Staff wanted to complete his most challenging day hike ever.
Fish and Game officers say the hiker from Florida activated an emergency beacon yesterday morning. He was hiking along the Appalachian Trail when the weather started to get worse. Officials say the snow was piled up to 3 feet in some spots, and there was a wind chill of -1 degree.
And there's 3 words to describe this race. Do we all know what they are? Only one hell!
Here's Lieutenant James Neeland, New Hampshire Fish and Game. Lieutenant, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
What are some of the most common mistakes you see people make when they're heading out on the trails to hike here in New Hampshire?
It seems to me the most common is being unprepared, and I think if they just simply visited hikesafe.com and got a list of the 10 essential items and had those in their